Hello everyone, Dr. Polaris here. The penguins of the southern hemisphere are among the most instantly recognisable of all birds. With their flightless, chubby, often black and white bodies, waddling gaits, and overall cute appearance. Their English name has somewhat uncertain origins, but may derive from the Welsh penguin, meaning white head. However, what is for certain is that this name was originally applied to a completely different flightless seabird, the Great Auk of the North Atlantic. This animal, despite being a fairly large wing-propelled diving bird incapable of flight, was not a penguin, but instead a member of the highly diverse charadriforms, a lineage of cosmopolitan distribution and comprised of wading shorebirds, terrestrial foragers such as the coursers, the carnivorous skuas, as well as the ubiquitous gulls. The Great Auk in particular was a part of the distinctive alcid family, a group of diving birds native to the northern hemisphere that demonstrate a mild form of convergent evolution with penguins, being specialised for swimming and catching prey from below the waves, while being relatively slow and clumsy when on land. Most species spend much of their lives out at sea, only returning to land in order to breed. However, unlike penguins, all living alcids retain the ability to fly. The family first appears in the fossil record during the late Eocene about 35 million years ago, although their remains are often scrappy and poorly preserved. This also marks another contrast with penguins, which have a significantly longer fossil history, appearing during the Paleocene roughly 62 million years ago, only a few million years after the KPG extinction event. The alcids are most closely related to the skuas and gulls, with all three of these groups having evolved from long-legged shorebird ancestors. The auks of Alcidae probably first developed in the North Pacific, with most of the modern genera having emerged during the late Miocene and Pliocene, when the diversity of the family was much higher than it is today. The Great Auk first appeared during the Middle Pleistocene, about 400,000 years ago, and was most closely related to the still-living razorbill, a flight-capable, agile diver native to the North Atlantic. Belonging to the genus Pinguinus impennis, and once also known as the gairfowl, the Great Auk was a distinctive bird that possessed slick plumage that was black over the back, stubby wings and head, with a white stomach, as well as distinctive light patches in front of the eyes. The beak was heavily built and hooked, being well adapted for catching slippery fish. It was the largest alcid to survive into modern times, with fully grown adults standing between 70 and 85 centimetres, or up to 33 inches tall, and weighing about 5 kilograms. The wings, on the other hand, were proportionally tiny, measuring just 15 centimetres or 6 inches long, rendering the animal flightless. It was, however, a strong swimmer and powerful diver, beating its small wings to propel itself while under the water. During the non-breeding season, the auk foraged in the waters of the North Atlantic, ranging as far south as northern Spain and along the coastlines of Canada, Greenland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Norway, Ireland and Great Britain. During the Pleistocene, the species possessed a wider range than it does today, with remains having been found across the western Mediterranean in Spain, southern France and Italy. In North America, sub-fossil remains have also been recovered from as far south as Florida. The bird left the North Atlantic waters for land only to breed, even roosting at sea when not breeding. The rookeries of the Great Auk were found from Baffin Bay to the Gulf of St. Lawrence and across the far northern Atlantic, including Iceland and in Norway and the British Isles in Europe. For their nesting colonies, the Great Auks required rocky islands with sloping shorelines that provided access to the sea. These were very limiting requirements, and it is believed that the species never had more than 20 breeding colonies. The nesting sites also needed to be close to rich feeding areas, and to be far enough from the mainland to discourage visitation by predators, such as humans, foxes and polar bears. As the Great Auk was never observed by trained modern scientists and zoologists, our understanding of its behaviour is quite poor, and is based mostly on older accounts, comparisons with its close relative the razorbill, as well as genetic evidence. It seems to have been the most deep diving of all alcids, being capable of holding its breath for up to 15 minutes, and diving to depths of up to 1 kilometre below the surface, although this was probably quite a rare occurrence. Their main prey base consisted of fish, with preferred species including Atlantic menhaden and caplin, while also taking cod, sculpins and lumpsuckers. The birds probably mated for life, much like other alcids, although mating likely still took place outside the pair on occasion, as in the related razorbill. Pair bonds were maintained by head-bobbing social displays, with these animals coming together to breed in vast noisy colonies, which could be extremely dense and crowded. Female great auks would lay only one egg each year, between late May and early June, which was deposited on bare rocky ground. The eggs were oval-shaped and elongated, being lightly coloured with dark spots. The mated pair would take turns incubating the egg until it hatched during late summer, producing a greyish downy chick that was cared for even after fledging. Human interaction with these birds extends all the way back to the Pleistocene, with the great auk being on the menu for Neanderthals as well as Homo sapiens. Various indigenous North American groups also hunted the bird for food, while later European sailors used their enormous breeding colonies as navigational aids. While navigating around the North Atlantic, the great auk provided sailors with a handy source of food if their rations ran low. By the early 16th century, the birds were being hunted on a massive scale, which drastically reduced their overall population numbers, with the demand coming from a desire to use the auk's feathers for fine pillows, as well as for meat, fish bait and oil produced from their fat deposits. Although laws to protect the species were passed in several European countries during the 18th century, these were simply too little too late. By this time, most breeding colonies in Northern Europe had vanished, with the increasing rarity of the auk encouraging wealthy collectors to seek out their eggs, which only helped to speed up the decline of the species. On the islet of Stack and Armagh, in St Kilda, Scotland, in July 1840, the last great auk seen in Britain was captured and killed. 3 men from St Kilda caught a single gairfowl, noticing its small wings and the large white spot on its head. They tied it up and kept it alive for 3 days, until a large storm arose. Believing that the bird was a witch and was causing the storm, they then killed it by beating it to death with a stick. The last colony of great auks lived on the so-called Great Auk Rock off the coast of Iceland. This islet was a volcanic rock surrounded by cliffs that made it inaccessible to humans. But in 1830, the islet submerged after a volcanic eruption, and the birds moved to the nearby island of Eldey, which unfortunately was accessible. When the colony was discovered in 1835, nearly 50 birds were present. Museums, desiring the skins of the great auk for preservation and display, quickly began collecting birds from the colony. The last pair, found incubating an egg, was killed there on the 3rd of June 1844, on request from a merchant who wanted specimens. The last known accepted sighting of the auk took place in 1852, when a single bird was spotted on the Great Banks of Newfoundland. Although allegedly sightings carried on for decades after this point, these were probably cases of mistaken identity, with the great auk's date of extinction generally acknowledged as being 1852. This tragedy reflects a similar fate as that suffered by many species during the modern period, that began with European exploration and colonisation of the Americas. While the auk had always been hunted by humans, it was the new industrial scale of these efforts to satisfy consumer demand for pillows and rare eggs that led to their ultimate extinction, as well as overexploitation by sailors as an easy source of food and oil. Although protection for the species were passed into law, these came too late. Today, 78 skins of the great auk remain, mostly in museum collections, along with approximately 75 eggs and 24 complete skeletons. This has motivated suggestions that the great auk can be revived through cloning, although, as ever, this remains a very controversial proposition. Indeed, the sad fate of the original penguin reminds us that careless overhunting can have massive consequences, and that extinct animals are often greatly admired only after they're lost forever, as was also the case for the thylacine or the passenger pigeon. Thanks for watching, everyone. The next episode will be covering a famous and very important theropod that helped to permanently change how paleontologists view dinosaurs, Deinonychus, an animal often thought of as being a small carnivore, but in reality was in the same size category as leopards, spotted hyenas, and the direwolf Anoscion, all animals very capable of killing humans. See you again soon. Cheerio.